Yeah, but this is what?
Yeah, this
Fourth one
week.
this week?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, both of it.
I'll start.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm looking at mine, it says 259. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. This is a Public Safety Committee meeting on Thursday, October 7th. I'd like to acknowledge that call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act, and that all committee members are present for the meeting. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the previous minutes meetings from September 1st, 2021.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item is citizens' comments. I know there's at least one that have signed up.
Mr. Hoosier signed up.
Mr. Hoosier has signed up, and I would ask that we limit the comments to 3 minutes. Mr. Hoosier?
Come there, state your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, Joshua Hoosier, 5 Sandpiper Court. Thank you for having me. I will limit my comments to 3 minutes. I timed it with a timer. So I'm running for mayor on November 2nd. And as my understanding is, this is the last public safety committee meeting before the election. So I just want to thank all of you for your service. Public safety is a very important issue, and I know that you all have worked really hard. This next council might look very different, and they might have a lot of different views than you all, but there's much to learn from the decisions that you all have made. I want to get into the agenda items today, but first I want to address an item that voters have been discussing, especially yesterday, and I think it might be brought up under the miscellaneous items today. And I have heard that people want my take on this issue, so I thought nothing better than to come to a city council meeting, a public safety meeting, and tell them. I'm going to be very clear that any retaliation against restaurants or drinking establishments on Front Beach for being so public in their support for Councilperson Buchanan is un-American, quite frankly. And I don't know where this is going, but I just want to be clear that it is un-American to retaliate for somebody for using their voice, and businesses have the right to do that. Personally, I think it's unneighborly to be so vocal supporting somebody like this in a political office. I think restaurants should be open to everybody. And so I would encourage the restaurants to think about that. I understand that you have allegiances, but at the end of the day, we're all neighbors, and my family, we frequent these restaurants. We spend a lot of money at these restaurants, and we're happy to do it. And I don't need you to support me for mayor, but I would just think we all need to be a little more respectful for everybody. I do also want to say that personally, live music in the beach to me is like peanut butter and jelly. They go together, and you can't separate the two. It would be a lot different of an island if that's how it went. I also want to talk about the process and not giving citizens a notice and opportunity to be heard. This happened with the 4th of July fireworks. You handle things in committees. People don't understand that that's how the city works. A lot of people are busy at the beach and enjoying themselves. And when you all pass things through committees, people don't have a chance to comment on them and to process them. And with the 4th of July fireworks being handled through the Ways and Means Committee, I was personally offended. I've been following the city, and it's been hard to keep up. It's been hard to keep up. So I would expect that the process is going to improve as we move forward. I think looking at the budgets for the police and fire, my personal take is that it's been lopsided. I don't understand why our fire department and our police department keep us safe. So these are questions that I have. Why has that budget been lopsided? Why have the police getting all this equipment and the fire's not? That's a question that I have. I also have a question about the focus on the connector when you're public safety, people are saying there haven't been any issues. I also have a question about the roads. How do you not know what roads are state-owned versus city roads? How do you not know how to do the speed limits? There's a citizen who caused an uproar a few months ago.
3 minutes.
There's a citizen that caused an uproar a few months ago about putting a bike in the middle of the road, putting it all over social media during a rainstorm and heavy beach traffic. And people got really upset about it. And if we had better attention, then residents wouldn't feel like they have to turn into vigilante public safety officers. So I am wrapping up right now. I look forward to hearing from more people. I hope more people will show up at council meetings to talk, and that will be encouraged because we all need to learn from each other and how to make this city better. So thank you so much for your
Thank you, Josh.
time.
Anyone else like to speak? Okay, then we'll move on to highlights of the departmental reports. First up, Interim Chief Briscoe. Welcome.
I would like to say that Chief Hathaway is on another assignment for the city today, so you're stuck with me. The good thing is we go to the same barber, so we're okay. So you shouldn't have too much trouble with me. But you have the reports in front of you. I'd like to cover a few highlights just for the general public. But if you'll follow along, please with me. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Starting out, you will see the September calls, the total calls are actually down from 76 to 71 from 2020 to 2021. But if you look over real quick to the year-to-date total calls, you'll see that we are 150 plus from last year. Now, if you were to ask me, Chief, why do you think that's possible that we're 150 more calls than we were last year? I would guess, just being here 8 or 9 days, but being at Oak Island, another place that is a lot like Isle of Palms, that our COVID freedom has let everybody get out a little more, and we appreciate that, or the ease of the COVID has helped us a lot personally, but I think it does add to the services that the city does need to provide for our citizens and our visitors. So you're going to see our calls be up there a little bit. But in September, we had 2 fires, 40 EMS calls, 4 rescues, 1 hazmat, 1 service call, and 23 other calls in September. To highlights, just to hit the highlights, on September the 2nd, fire crews responded to an appliance fire at Harris Teeter's. They had already been extinguished. The fire had already been extinguished, and firefighters searched the area for a possible fire extension or hazard and did not find any, so they returned back to quarters. And that was on the 2nd. Also on the 2nd, we had a motor vehicle crash involving a pedestrian. This is always bad. There were traumatic injuries. The firefighters provided emergency medical care until Charleston County arrived on the scene. At that time, it was turned over to them and the patient was transported. Our units returned back to base. So everything was taken care of. On the 14th, you'll see that fire crews responded to a outside fire. And upon their arrival, they found that the fire had been extinguished prior to their arrival. Firefighters again checked the area for extension and hazards. None were found, and they returned back to base. The next 2 are kind of near and dear to my heart. I was what they called a belly crawler for many years. I was a firefighter. But if you look on the 17th and 18th, our fire marshal was involved in a couple of things. And something that you'll learn that I'll say a dozen times, our fire marshal probably saves more lives every day through his actions and looking after buildings and fire codes and than any belly crawler will ever do in their career. But on the 17th, Fire Marshal Stafford set up a fire safety education table at the City of Palms Wellness Fair. Did a great job interacting with our folks. And I'm also big on customer service. I truly believe that, and he's done very well with that. On the 18th, Fire Marshal Stafford set up, in conjunction with Mount Pleasant, at the target a car safety seat check. Now, if you've got children or grandchildren, you know how important that is to have the seat put in place properly. That is truly important. And I'm, again, big on that. On the 23rd of September, you were introduced to the new interim fire chief for the Isle of Palms. And then on the 30th, being the new interim, I was given the ability to meet with every firefighter, from the most senior to the newest person to walk through the door. And they had some questions. One of the questions was the support that we would give them, whether it be the public or the council or the administration or whatever. And firefighter Cody Marlowe was awarded the City of Isle of Palms Firefighter Employee of the Quarter. And I got to present him with a certificate. Now, that was pretty special for me to see somebody that enjoyed their position and enjoyed serving the people of Isle of Palms. That was pretty cool. And he did a great job, and it was a great pleasure. But then I was overwhelmed by, and I apologize because I can't remember the lady's name for the Employee of the Year that sponsors that.
Leola.
Okay, Leola. All right, I'll try to remember that. With a name like Briscoe, you think but I can't. But not only the 2020 award, but the 2021, and the council awarded the entire city. And the fire service is truly grateful, not only for that, but also for the gracious gift that came along with that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Another thing they asked, and it's not on your paper, but I got to do this, and I'll give you a little more background in October about it. But another question was what they call 1710, and I'm sure that you've heard that, and I don't know if I've got a copy of 1710, 1720 with me now, but it's the staffing responsibilities that come along with a fire service on low, medium, and high hazard. And low hazards, which are a house fire, normally have about 15 people on the scene is the recommendation. We have 10 people on duty. So right off the bat, whether it's old council or the new council, you're scratching your head and fussing at Miss Desiree, not fussing, but discussing with Miss Desiree, how are we going to meet NFPA, National Fire Protection Association 1710. And that's my job for her, is to create options. So I had the pleasure and the honor of meeting Chief Mixon at Mount Pleasant this past week to discuss some options that we could do to meet 1710 without putting a burden on taxpayers or whoever else we have to put it on, which I think is great because I've always lived in the city. So I'm very particular about my funding because I help pay for it. But anyway, got to meet with him. And then this morning, the chief from Charleston reached out to us. So we're looking for a very busy and exciting October that we may can give Miss Desiree some options. And with those options that she can bring forth to you guys, that would be great, I think, for the fire service. That's my report, sir.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No questions.
Very good.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And now we'll have the police report, Captain Swain.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So on the police side for the month of September, looking back, overall, we had a safe and smooth Labor Day weekend event. We had extra staffing, obviously, for that weekend because of the beachgoers. And since that weekend, we've seen a lot of the beach traffic kind of fall off a little bit, which is always expected and anticipated this time of year. But overall, for the month of September, we had 876 calls for service. Some more highlights, we had 74 incident reports completed. There were 5 traffic collisions this month that were reported. If you're looking at the monthly report sheet here, you're going to notice on the activity summary on the left side here, there's actually some new categories now. And this is in line with the dispatch center, the way that they actually keep our stats too now. So this is starting to happen. If you look, you'll see bicycle stops, you'll see golf cart stops. You'll also see marine calls for service as well. So we've actually begun a few instances where we've taken this new boat out and gone on patrol. We've actually issued our first citation out there on the water for a no wake zone. So it's probably the first time the Ala Palms Police Department has written that ticket in quite a while. But that is happening. I wanted to make a note of that on here. If you also look at September, there were 45 total arrests. That number's a little higher than this time last year. There were 132 parking citations issued for the month of September. Looking at, I did want to follow up from last month. I was looking at last month's notes regarding all the increase in sick raccoons here on the island. One of those raccoons that was deceased was sent off to DHEC for official testing, and that returned with a distemper assessment on that animal rather than any rabies. So DHEC agreed that there is a bad bout of distemper going around the raccoons here on the island. So if anybody does see that, we encourage them to call us right away. We can send animal control or an officer out for that. Any raccoons acting funny, because that's what they're going to do with that distemper. But there was no rabies in that animal, so that's a good thing. On the technology side, in September, I do want to announce that the police department, most people might not think it's a big deal. It's a big deal to me. We switched over to a new NCIC program. If you're familiar with NCIC, this is the computer program that connects kind of the Isle of Palms Police to all the other police departments and federal agencies in the country, and even beyond that. But we went to a completely web-based version of NCIC. It's a much more modern version of NCIC. And so far, the initial users on that, we're getting a lot of positive feedback. So we're very happy to be modernizing the department in that respect. I want to announce that Officer Jason Santulli was named the Police Department Employee of the Quarter. We do the same thing as the fire department does every quarter. And he earned that through very active DUI enforcement and some great arrests that he made. One of the arrests he made, he actually arrested a subject who was here on the island driving in a stolen vehicle. And our assessment of that whole incident was that he was probably over here looking to commit other crimes. So we commend Officer Santulli for that arrest as well. That concludes my report, but I'd be willing to take any questions if you guys have.
Philip, Jimmy, any questions? No,
Thank you.
thank you much. Okay, moving on to old business. I talked to the mayor before the meeting, and I'd like to start, if I can, and make a motion to move item C up in the agenda and have a quick conversation about the update on the modifications to the IOP connector and our current position with SEDOT on that.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So regarding that, I think many people know that when the connector was restriped, I gotta pull this mask down, there becomes a point when you just cannot breathe through it. When the connector was restriped, obviously it was done quickly, to say the least, and without consultation with the city. And the agreement, and frankly, contrary to what I've seen publicly, there have been a lot of cordial professional meetings with Secretary Hall regarding actions on the island. And we had agreed that we would collect information on the connector, do a more or less state-sponsored study. Senator Campson was involved, Desiree was involved, I had some engagement. And we would use that data to make a determination as to whether or not we really had an issue with this and to make future recommendations. That has been slow. The data collection, according to Secretary Hall, has not been slow because unbeknownst to some of us, they actually track your GPS data and everything in your phone. They can tell you how the average speed on Palm Boulevard and everywhere. So there's been an ongoing data collection. we spent a significant amount of time with her trying to find a suitable a suitable entity that didn't have a close relation with SCDOT to provide the oversight that council had asked for, so that we don't get a blind one-way answer, if you will, from SCDOT that the community may not have confidence in. That's where that sits right now. I gotta say, and I promised the mayor that I was gonna bring it up, and I'm only gonna speak for myself. After seeing this week's postings that people send me, I'm not on social media, where our Secretary of Transportation is awarding the beach access group signs praising their, I'm gonna call it what it is, assault on this community and the parking, that I don't personally have any confidence of engaging with Secretary Hall for studies commissioned by the city. And I think we as a community need to look at what we need to do for this community and do a bit of a reassessment. I'm going to ask that Desiree makes this part of the public record, because I think it is important. But when I see postings from Myra Jones, who's the head of the Beach Access Group, thanking her for awarding signs that say public beach parking at a time when we are trying to professionally engage with the state on a neutral relationship to make a determination as to what's best, not just for this community, but for Mount Pleasant and surrounding communities to safely traverse that connector or any other associated issues regarding public safety. I'm personally appalled by it, and I'll leave it at that. I don't know, Councilman Ward or Pounce, if you have any comments, but I wanted to have that conversation in the community because it is a political issue right now. And I think it's something we all need to be aware of, because there's very few of us that live here that think a 4-foot safety lane in the middle is a good idea.
Yeah, I guess, Randy, you would expect a state employee or a city employee or whatever to not have a political bent and make a political statement, for sure. It was disappointing to see. I would agree.
You know, like I said, I unless somebody wants to have more discussion on it, I think it's an item that moves to full council for further discussion. I don't, believe me, this one caught us all off guard. And I think Desiree would, I've had multiple meetings with Secretary Hall. They've been good, courteous, productive meetings. This one took me by surprise. I'm really, really shocked. Desiree?
Yeah, just a question for the committee, for clarity. Is the recommendation or the discussion that the city should consider engaging its own study of the connector rather than having an engineer oversee on our behalf and work with SCDOT on our behalf?
This is not an actionable item on the agenda. So I would recommend that we have that discussion at council. And if the mayor chooses to make it an actionable item, that we make it an actionable item at the council meeting.
Desiree, we had, remind me, because we had some number of money, $5,000 or $10,000 or something, I think, in our budget,
15.
15.
15,000.
15 to oversight the study. Gotcha.
Correct.
Okay. So Randy, are we, I guess, Mayor, are we taking this to Ways and Means or Council or both? We can decide procedurally
Yeah,
later.
I think
Okay.
we decide procedurally, but you know, the net of it is we don't have progress on a study right now. The question is, do we wish to continue on the path that we're on, which there's no definition of scope that's been defined. I don't like studies for the sake of a study. And I've had conversation with Desiree. I think this year is a bit anomalous. I have my own personal theory, which wouldn't be the first time I'm wrong, but I think the beach season really stretched out. I mean, parents were able to bring their children to the beach early. They had full access to their kids during the day. I don't think we had the normal 10-week rush and crush of a normalized summer. So when we look at the connector, and we ask this question of police and fire every meeting, did we have anything with the connectors restriping that gave us concern? Did it cause any particular incident to not be addressed appropriately? The answer is no. Unfortunately, when it happens, we're all going to go, whoa, right? So I don't know that you can take the data from 2021 and say that this is a true representative sample of the kind of activity coming across a normalized summer, but that's the data that we've collected. So I think, you know, there's more than one reason to kind of catch our breath on this and go, what are we doing? you know, we want to spend $15,000, have a report that says, hey, guess what? We didn't have any issues. Right? I mean, so anyway, I'll leave it at that. Okay, next item, we go back. Favorite subject, discussion and consideration of proposed amendments to the dog ordinance to include restriction of vicious or dangerous dogs. This discussion has gone on forever, long before I was here. And where we left it at the last public safety meeting was most ordinances that we look at are hardly enforceable. They're very subjective. You have to make a determination. Wow, do I think that dog's vicious? And Desiree looked into what surrounding communities have done. We had a discussion that I think it was Councilman Ward's suggestion that, no pun intended, we put some teeth into it. And if we're going to have fines, that, you know, those fines are representative of something that really would prevent somebody from egregious behavior, improper behavior with their dogs. So Desiree brought forward in this package information that hopefully everyone's read that define what constitutes a vicious or dangerous dog. I did find it a little bit humorous. There was a lot of reference to feline. I've yet to be attacked by a cat out here. But I can imagine there's people with large felines as well. The question I did have of Desiree is, it is interesting that most of our surrounding communities have definitions in place, and they have fines in place, and they have registration in place for their, what are deemed vicious or dangerous dogs. And I asked, and I don't even know if this is possible, but if I have a dangerous dog and I live in Mount Pleasant and I'm under restrictions because it's defined and registered as a dangerous dog, no problem. I'll bring it to the beach at Isle of Palms and let it run free. So I think all we're asking is to give city administration some direction in defining what that looks like in how we adopt it into an ordinance. It's not an attempt to change and take away people's perceived rights to have a dog on the beach. Chip, we generally don't entertain. Yeah.
And Randy or Desiree, because I know a resident had provided from a different city, and it was breed specific, which is different than these ordinances that are in the surrounding communities. So you didn't find a breed, was that Florida maybe where that, I think that might have been.
No, but in fact, it was
anyway.
excluded in some of the language that Desiree provided
Yeah.
because it's a real touchy subject in training and raising a dog as to whether, you know, specific breeds should be excluded.
Yeah, when you look at the definition of dangerous dogs or even dangerous animals, you don't see, at least in our neighboring communities, you don't see a specific mention of a particular breed. And even interestingly, to me as well, reading everyone's ordinances, there are some that actually define dangerous dogs and others that just leave it general as in dangerous animal. And then restrictions about those that are defined, fall within the definition of a dangerous animal, that they must not be unconfined. So there's a restriction there. So that's going to be up for the committee.
Yeah.
Do you want to make it specific? Do you want a similar statute in our code, which you can see in the first page in the table comparing ourselves with others that we're the only ones that do not have a vicious animal law in the books? If you want to do that, that's a question for the committee. And then second question would be, what would that language look like? We've provided some examples of what that could look like, but we're looking for some good direction so that we can draft something for you all to consider.
The generalized language across all the other city ordinances, an animal that unprovoked would appear likely to attack or endanger a human or another pet. I read them all and I look at them, I go, well, unfortunately, I'm not sure how you enforce that. So at some point we'll defer back to the police chief. Until someone or something is attacked, it's hard to subjectively say, well, it looked like that animal was going to attack me. And unfortunately, it looks like, you know, post-attack registration. I do think it's still a good message to the public that if you have an animal, and I don't think anyone's lived here very long that hasn't had a dog come up to their dog or to themselves in an aggressive manner, that animal should be restrained and on a leash. And I think the intent of the other communities was to define that as best they can. without overreach, if you will, into assuming that every animal is a bad animal.
And I guess, Captain Swain, this may not be fair because Chief Cornette's been involved in a lot of these conversations. Did you have a reaction to, because I know our current ordinance is hard to enforce too from voice command, and this seems like we're kind of headed down the same path, but what's your,
One point that I'd like to point out is that if the city ever did adopt a city ordinance similar to the ones we see here in other jurisdictions, currently our animal control officer is not even a class 3 officer as defined by the state. Most police officers like myself are class 1, and we can write these state tickets for the state laws that you see here in front of you now regarding vicious animals and dangerous dogs. He cannot. So if the city ever did implement a city ordinance that had the same type of language as the state laws do regarding vicious animals, then that animal control officer that we have now would be able to write that onto a city citation. And, there's still a lot, seems like there's a lot more to work out still in terms of the definitions and the language you guys want, but I want to make sure you saw that point on here as well. Personally, I think that, the chief and I would probably agree that it would be useful, another useful tool for the police department to be
Okay.
able to handle, vicious dogs. Because right now, the dog ordinance that deals with dogs off of a leash, that ticket, if someone gets that ticket because they're off hours or they're on the beach and their dog is not under their control, or they're running through the neighborhood, then, someone could get a ticket for that. And if someone's dog gets out and actually bites a person, God forbid, then they're going to get that same ticket right now. The two tickets are really kind of identical, but yet they don't really kind of weigh the same if you look at it from the outside. So there is possibly some benefit to looking at this.
So do we need to, Desiree, have an action or just instruct to come back to the next public safety committee meeting with a recommendation on language around vicious or dangerous animals?
The item on the agenda is actionable, so you all can make a recommendation and assign staff to draft that language in whatever way you all would like to see it, whether you want to see a definition or statute regarding dangerous dogs, vicious dogs, or broadly
I-
include all animals.
It's easy for me. I've only got one more of these meetings and these two can deal with it going forward. But
Desiree, did you have a reaction to all the examples you gave us? Because I mean, some of them are pretty lengthy.
They
I
are.
really would ask and defer to the police department.
Yeah.
They're the ones that enforce it, and I would look at them to advise me about what, would be easier for them
Yeah.
or,
I mean, Sullivan's is very short,
mhm.
brief, gets the point across, and
I was getting
Yeah,
ready
I
to
don't
say,
know.
keep it simple.
yeah, Captain Swain, if you have a
Yeah.
chance to look at that one, what your view is, but that one seems pretty easy to me.
So I'll make a motion that we have the city come forward with a statute that does provide definition and appropriate fines for enforcement with dangerous or vicious animals.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Councilman Ward?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. It is the first thing we've ever accomplished on dogs in probably quite a few years.
Nothing to that.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. All right. Item B, the discussion of speeding issues on the avenues in consideration of reducing the speed limit on interior streets. This arose out of discussion and confusion as to what, and actually to Mr. Hoozer's comment, 90% of the streets on this island are owned by the state. And unless those streets are marked differently, they are 30-mile-per-hour speed limits, even in the interior neighborhoods. So it causes signage to be 25 miles an hour. Seems a little backwards, but that is actually what it is. So there was discussion with SCDOT, could we have a standardized 25 miles per hour within the residential streets unless otherwise marked? Which one would think one great big sign that says 25 miles an hour unless otherwise instructed is better than a lot of exception signs scattered all over the neighborhoods that are already 30 miles an hour. Desiree?
Yes, I've had discussions with SCDOT staff about this issue. And my recommendation would be for the committee to consider presenting to city council a resolution with a request to DOT to make that change. Where would be, all streets would be 25 or less, with the exception of those streets that are posted at 30 miles an hour, which at this point would be Palm Boulevard.
Palm Boulevard.
That would be my recommendation, and you all can make a recommendation to city council to consider such an resolution.
And we should make that actionable today.
You may if you want.
I would,
Repeat that. That's right, what you just said.
So we've been discussing about speeding on the residential areas. So one option, what I'm recommending is that the city submits a formal request through a resolution to DOT so that they consider establishing a reduced speed limit on all roads on the island to 25%.
25 miles an hour.
25 miles an hour or less, with the exception of Palm Boulevard, which is 30 miles an hour.
So in other words, 25 miles per hour or less unless otherwise
Yeah.
posted.
That's correct.
I make a motion to, if we don't already have one,
We don't.
We do not.
make a motion to recommend this to full council.
Second. And Desiree, I'm assuming, because we've had this conversation also for quite a while, that would let us to get rid of a lot of signage on the island and
Yes.
have one kind of when you come over the connector or breach
Correct.
to that effect. Yeah, okay.
Okay,
It may address sign pollution as well.
yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item D, discussion of enforcement of golf cart regulations. Captain Swain, looks like you got nominated again today.
So rather than boring you with a bunch of statistics and stuff here, I think that I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I know you guys, this is kind of a hot topic this year. And I can speak for the police department in that Chief Cornett kind of laid down a whole plan of attack, so to speak, for this particular season on golf cart enforcement. And from what I've seen, it did work in terms of there was a definite improvement of education along with the enforcement factor for golf cart rules, because there are so many here on the island. In fact, I've been here for about 11 years now. I don't think that I've ever seen so many DUIs that came out as a result of golf cart stops. A lot of folks don't realize that you can get a DUI on a golf cart as well if you're out on the public roadway with it. So that being said, I'm not sure exactly which direction you guys were looking. You were looking for maybe an additional city ordinance, again, that type of thing. The state laws are already pretty well versed on golf cart
Captain Swain, if I
regulations.
may, I think it was more education than, passing new ordinances. So many people come here and they don't live here, and you see 10-year-olds driving golf carts around and they think that's okay because they don't know any differently. And, the discussions have been having the rental management companies and others, adequately informing people as to what the state laws are and ensuring that we enforce those. I mean, personally, I've had conversation with Chief Cornett. There's a couple of things that's real simple. One, it needs to be registered and insured. So that's, preclusive of people just leaving a golf cart at their rental home. And you see these golf carts, the first thing the kids do is get in the cart and decide they're going to drive around the neighborhood. Right. So I don't know. I asked the other council members to weigh in. I don't think we were looking for some change in ordinance unless I misunderstand.
Well, I can definitely say that the golf cart education factor is one thing. When we get a community event going, we do hand out the flyers, and we try to talk to people about it. We use social media to put that stuff out. All that stuff happened this year, but in my opinion, the easiest way to educate folks, the most effective way to educate folks, is to actually stop these golf carts as they're doing it and educate those people right there on the scene. And sometimes even get tickets out. There's no better education than that. And that number has really increased this year. There's been some problems with how we disseminate the data, but that's going to be fixed now with what I just talked about earlier in the monthly report, where the data is coming down from the dispatch center as an actual golf cart stop. Unfortunately, the way our system is now, if someone goes through a stop sign on a golf cart, or at least up until last month, If someone goes to a stop sign, that stop sign ticket doesn't look any different than one I would give someone in a car. So that's the kind of the problem with the giving you the actual stats, but I know that the numbers have been way up this year and the campaign, I think, has worked to some degree.
Councilman Ward?
I had a specific change to the ordinance. I asked the chief Cornett about it at our last meeting. And my concern is these unrestrained small children, even infants, that are riding in these golf carts without seatbelts. In many instances, I've seen parents, I think they're the parents.
Oh, yeah.
Be driving and having a small infant sitting in their lap as they're driving a golf cart. And I asked the chief about it. I said, can we do something about that? Like there may be a child restraining seat or something similar to a motor vehicle, car. And he seemed to think in a positive manner that we could look into that.
Unfortunately, I don't have the actual answer for that now,
Right.
but I know that the way that that vehicle is defined through state law, it just doesn't have the same requirements as an automobile does,
Well, I
unfortunately.
understand that,
So
but
we'd be-
my point was to him, I'm sorry to interrupt, was that can we, outside of, I mean, I was careful with the way I worded it. I understand the state statutes and stuff, but can we, outside the state statute, include other, if you will, regulations? And he seemed to think that we could. And I mean, I know you don't know. the
I would
answer.
default to a
I'm not-
law, yeah, the law, the
Well, I'm
legal.
not trying to
legal
put you on
limit.
a bad spot, but we'll just talk to the chief maybe next month about it.
Yeah, Councilmember Ward, I know that he's been researching that.
It's more of a legal question. I think.
Correct. We've
Of
been,
course.
we've been discussing it. We just do not have a
And
straight
and most
answer.
golf carts don't have seatbelts. Right? The LSVs are all equipped with seatbelts.
Some do. I don't know.
Mine-
if
mine
most.
does.
Yeah,
Does
mine
it?
does too.
I will say, though, that one of the opportunities that we have tried to take advantage of as we continue to put together events that involve golf carts. We're repeating the holiday golf cart parade this year through the Recreation Center, and part of the application, which is online for everybody who's interested in participating. We do require registration information, and that has served as a great opportunity for people who are not aware that they need to have their golf carts registered, do so, because if not, they won't be able to participate. So we're trying to, get the word out and get to people the information that they need. And we'll continue to do that. But I do think that, an intentional effort from police department to stop folks, not necessarily to give tickets all the time, but just to have a conversation, because oftentimes folks just don't know.
To Jimmy's point, I mean, I certainly would support anything that protects children over their parents' failure to protect them. So, if we can continue to look at that,
Yeah,
and figure
I
out.
don't want anything intrusive. It just seems like common sense to me. That infants shouldn't be, no automobile, they're not sitting in their parents' lap when they're driving.
They wouldn't dare do that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all.
Philip,
Thank
anything else? Nope. Good. Okay, item E, update on Coyote management efforts, which we did cover a little bit already. He thinks he gets to sit down already, but
Well,
yeah.
Jeff,
Yeah.
if I may, maybe
Yeah.
you can fill up. One of the things that we reported about last month was our efforts to try to find a reasonable and legal way for the city to partner with property owners so that we may have the ability to trap along private property. As you all know, we're limited in where we can place traps. We have not been successful when we place traps in public areas because a lot of the times the coyote sightings happen in areas that are private. So that's another matter that we're reviewing with our legal team. What options do we have? Because I know that there's a section, particularly, I think around 25th Avenue, that has received a few sightings. We were successful earlier this year with the capture of several coyotes where a property owner had hired a trapper and placed traps privately. So we know what's successful. We're just limited because of the successful options being in private property. So we're still looking at that. The coyote trapping season starts in November.
December, I told you November, but it's actually December.
Okay, December
December
through
1st.
March, I believe.
December
Yes.
1st through the end of March. is the designated state DNR fur bearing trapping season. So during that time, any licensed trapper,
Yeah.
like a company you would call up for nuisance animals, can come out and trap on your private property. Any dates outside of that window, individual property owners would have to contact SCDNR and obtain a depredation permit from them prior to trapping on their private property. And basically what we would do is help them through that process and help them with finding the licensed trappers, that most of which are on the website anyway, the DNR website.
So I have a little bit of a different twist question on this. When we did this, Jimmy, you and I were on public safety then. One of the big concerns was the abundance of coyotes on low corporation-owned land in Wild Dunes. And we had reached out at the time, and I'm going from memory here, to see whether they would cooperate with us in some active coyote trapping. And that was through Dave Konoski at the time. And I don't know that we ever made any real progress with them, but the amount of land and the complaints that come from Wild Dunes on coyotes, we've got, active coyotes on the beach, and we have a lot of active coyotes in Wild Dunes. Can I just ask that we reach out again and try to make this a cooperative effort if we're going to do it? Because those that are more fond of coyote research than I am will tell you that it's very cyclical, and one year they might not be here. It appears this year we've had another kind of a ramp up of coyote activity because we've trapped on private land. We're at 7 now.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, a few years ago when we were doing this monthly, we were catching everything but coyotes. I think we trapped 2 over the course of going on 2 years. So I don't know we need to do anything else other than, continue down the path we're on, but see whether we can get some additional cooperation from Wild Dunes. Okay, new business. Item A, discussion and consideration of submitting a request to SCDNR to reinstate the no wake zone on the intracoastal waterway. So Desiree, if you want to speak to it,
Sure, I'll try to set it up. This was,
put the dates out there where we're at now.
well.
Because it just got reinstated, the no wake got removed
Cool.
seasonally.
Correct. So this was introduced at the Real Property Committee earlier this week, and they asked for this committee to look at it again. I know that the community, there's been the community of Goat Island and folks at the Isle of Palms have for many years tried to advocate to DNR for the extension of the no wake zone on the intercoastal waterway, and that was enacted this year, but it's only through, I believe, September 15th.
It just ended, yeah.
It's just seasonal. I think folks from the community have reached out to members of council to see whether the city would want to entertain a request to DNR from, formally, officially from the city to support their efforts at getting the extension maintained past September 15th. So that's what this is just for you all to consider whether or not
Yeah,
the city
just-
wants to take a position.
And just to add a little clarity, it's really from roughly 41st to the connector. And that section, which is heavily, populated, Goat Island and the intracoastal waterway docks along there and places where the mayor used to have a house. Oh, he's kind of nodding and laughing along there. This has been an ongoing request. Frankly, to me, it just makes sense. It's heavily traversed. We're talking about a public dock and, more people on the water trying to safely navigate. So I asked Desiree to make this actionable so we can move it to full council, and all it would be is a resolution asking the state to do this. So I will make that in the form of a motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Discussion of beautification plan for Palm Boulevard. This one ought to be fairly quick. This is not the grand plan for Palm Boulevard. This goes back to the prior discussions with Secretary Hall when whether we were in favor or not, the state was going to put angled parking on Palm Boulevard, and they did. We have a much more orderly but ugly implementation. And the commitment was by the state that we would do that for this season. And when this season ended, they would revisit doing something that was more aesthetically pleasing to the community. And I might add that we're the ones maintaining it, even though it's state responsibility, but trimming around angled blocks that are ugly is probably not ideal. So I asked that we look at this again, since this was a commitment from the state. And I think, Desiree, correct me if I'm wrong, but Secretary Hall's recommendation was, well, we'll just remove those side blocks, if you will, and paint the forward-looking to blend in more. That's probably not the most beautiful thing either. So, Desiree.
Well, one of the things that was suggested even throughout the summer was to remove those side bumpers. That's something that we've discussed with police, and Chief Cornett and I do not think that the time is right to do that yet. I mean, folks are still getting used to the
Training wheels.
angled parking, and you know, all in all, the parking has worked well. It's much better organized. I know that if Captain Swain has any comments to it, but overall, it's improved the conditions significantly. Certainly, we can remove the side bumpers. I think that they help people park at the right angle, that we think it's important for them to do so, so that it is safe when they're backing out. Another option was to paint the existing bumpers different colors so that they are not as noticeable as the gray. So those are options that we're considering short term, if you will.
And just to revisit for everybody, we looked at these, company was called True Grid was one of the companies, but where they're actually, if you will, flush mounted to the ground, but the substrate underneath them had to be, I want to say 18 inches deep and supportable. And when you calculated the cost of doing that, you could redo it with Ipe wood cheaper than you could these inlays. So it just wasn't feasible. And the question was, you know, what would be amenable? And frankly, the last conversation with Secretary Hall that I was involved in with Desiree was, why don't we figure out, and this will be for the next council, not for me, but how do we really partner to make Palm look the way the community would want it to look in a very constructive engagement with the state. And it may be that this just gets punted and we go through this, removing them. And I said to Secretary Hall, those are training wheels for people who don't know how to park. I mean, I don't have any delusion that people would park in those angles without some guidance alongside them. So I wanted to bring it up. It's one of those, Jimmy, you're fond of this, leave it on the agenda until it's corrected kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. No comments?
No,
We're good. Okay, so miscellaneous business. So normally we don't have any. So I get to be the lead off here. I'm frankly stunned at the stuff that's been sent to me, being a non-Facebook person, about us trying to do something different with live music. I chuckled with Desiree. I said, I'm the guy with all the guitars hanging behind me at my house. I certainly don't want to see live music shut down anywhere. Desiree had requested of me yesterday morning that I add an agenda item because, and I don't even remember how many months ago, there had been some discussion about ensuring that Front Beach businesses, predominantly the Windjammer, was compliant to the ordinances the way that we had them currently on the books. And like most of our ordinances, they're a little messy. And there was a suggestion that we clean that language up to ensure that we could have live music at the beach compliant to the resolutions. This was nothing more than that. When Facebook lit up, and like I said, I got people calling me going, you know, what are you guys doing? I said, look, this is an administrative item that was brought to my attention at the request of the city so that we could ensure that we were doing this properly. She called me later in the afternoon and said, wow, what do you think? I said, just take it off the agenda. I said, none of us want to stop live music at the beach, right? We've had a few complaints. I think we need to be cognizant of resident complaints. I think the businesses do the best, but you know, the Windjammer's been there a long time. I wanted to have the discussion under miscellaneous business so that we can stop the politicizing and, you know, stuff that's just simply not happening. There's nobody sitting up here that I'm aware of that would suggest in any way, shape or form that we not have live music at the beach. I sort of grew up with it and hope to die with it. So,
Yeah, and just as a reminder, real
It's
quick,
very
yeah,
important.
please.
I don't mind a statement from the chair, but I don't want a discussion because it was on the agenda, then it was off the agenda, and now I do not. So I will raise point of order if we start having a discussion about this. I appreciate Randy's sentiment. He's telling us about how he feels about the issue. He's the chair. He has the right to do that, but it is not on the agenda. And I do not want it discussed.
I'm not sure where the point of order comes in on that. It's a
It's not on the agenda.
well, it's a miscellaneous business item, and unfortunately, there was a published agenda that was there for about 5 minutes that somehow made its way to Facebook and caused confusion in the community that's worthy of some level of discussion and understanding. And I don't know that there needs to be discussion because I don't think there's debate on this item. What I would recommend is that if ordinances and code need to be cleaned up, and again, it won't be for me sitting here, that Desiree go back and look at what the original intent was to make sure that the businesses are compliant and move it forward through either next month's public safety committee or ongoing councils. But I think an issue has been made of something that in my mind was not an issue. So, you know, I'll leave it at that.
Very good. When's our next meeting?
Next meeting date, 3 p.m. Thursday, November 4th.
Randy, that does not work. Can we
I'm
look at
sorry?
changing it?
No, that date does not work. I mean, that's a horrible date for that. Kick it a week. Jimmy, you good with
Yeah,
that?
I'm fine.
let me check with the other.
And Desiree, you can get back to us when, because you've got to schedule around the other ones, because anybody, normally, you know, that's election week and it's just not a good week to try to have another meeting.
We could do Wednesday, the 10th.
Wednesday, the 10th, 3 o'clock. No executive session needed.
One last thing.
Yes, please, Jimmy.
Mr. Chairman. I would respectfully request that you consider not having a meeting this December.
I will respectfully request we not have a meeting this
Right.
December.
Yeah, public works not gonna do it. That's what
We're not having a meeting in December.
Right. Very good. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Off record 3:57.